Hey, thanks for coming out tonight, everybody. I've had a request to do an overview of the project, and I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
My name is Patty Grantham. I'm the Forest Supervisor in Klamath, and I'm joined with some of my colleagues here tonight that I will let them introduce themselves and their role in the Westside project.
My name is Clint Isbell. I'm a fire ecologist on the Klamath National Forest, and I'm the fuel specialist for this project.
My name is Mike Hupp. I'm the team leader. I'm actually a contractor with the Forest Service, but I worked for the Forest Service for about 35 years, 34 years, something like that, a long time. And my specialty is NEPA and managing environmental impact statements.
My name is Andrew Scotland. I'm the Deputy District Ranger on the Salmon Scott River Ranger Districts, and I'm the co-team leader with Mike.
My name is Carl Yreka. I work on the Salmon Scott District of the Klamath. Trees, big ones, little ones, that's my responsibility on our districts. And I'm not part of the actual ID team. We hosted about a third of the area for the ID team this past summer.
My name is Travis Kaufman. I'm a forester on Salmon and Scott River Ranger District. I've been involved in the logging systems and operations side, so happy to answer any of those questions you guys have.
My name is Joshua Veal. I'm Public Affairs Officer, Klamath National Forest.
So, so here's my brief overview on this, and these fine people will help keep me honest, and they will interject things that I'm forgetting as we go on. So I think probably most people in this room have a sense that Klamath had a very large fire season last year. In fact, it burned about 225,000 acres across the forest. And that included, I think, about 30,000 acres of private lands. So we also, a number of you in here are familiar to me from a lot of the public meetings that we did during the fires and at the tail end. We talked about the emergency restoration actions we were going to do and that kind of stuff. And one of the most common questions I heard from folks when we were having all these public meetings was, well, what's going to happen to all this area? And that was a very legitimate question. So born out of answering that question is the Westside Fire Recovery Project. We started back in October, November-ish with scoping. Some of you may be familiar with our NEPA process. We, put together a proposed action and just said, hey, the fire burned all this area. We're thinking about, doing this level of treatment. What are the things that we should be concerned about? And so got a pretty good response to that scoping. And as a result of the scoping comments, we built a number of alternatives. We had a number of comments centered around concerns over wildlife, particularly spotted owl. A lot of spotted owl habitat, that was included in this area and that was affected by the fire. So if you're looking around on things, that's alternative number 3. Okay. We also heard from folks that they were really concerned about impacts to watershed values, to fisheries, to coho salmon, sedimentation of streams, that kind of thing. So we built an alternative around that. That's alternative number 4. We also heard from folks that said a lot of this project, a lot of where the fire burned included a land use designation. We have a forest plan, and it's kind of like a zoning document, right? So we have these land use designations that are akin to zoning. And a lot of the fire burned in the zone or the land use designation that's late successional reserves. And those are areas that are really set aside to try to promote and develop and retain old forest values because of the, the species that rely on that. And, given that there was a lot of concern around, potentially doing treatments in late successional reserves, we also built alternative number 5 that really focused any salvage harvest that we were doing on what we call matrix lands. And matrix lands are really those lands that, were set aside for timber management purposes. We also received a alternative from the Karuk tribe, and I'm careful at describing it because it's not my, it's not my alternative, but I would say it's, it's the Karuk's alternative, and I want to consider it fully, and so I apologize to them in advance if I'm massacring it. But really, the Karuk alternative is focused on, returning landscape level fire to the landscape, getting fuel breaks established on key ridge lines and around some communities. What am I leaving out? And doing some roadside treatments again, and I think most of those are, with a with an eye towards, creating those fuel breaks out there that are going to help when natural fire starts to allow it to play its natural role on the land and not present a great threat to communities. And so, like I said, yeah, underburning also. So, what else do we want to talk about?
I think you did a great job of giving an overview of the alternatives. And
Yes. So, I'm 55 years old, so I have to stop Andrew because when I think of something that I got to say, I need to say it because I'm not gonna remember it in 2 minutes. So we've had, we're hosting, open houses in places where people would like to learn more about the project. Would love to get feedback and comment on the project. The comment deadline on the draft environmental impact statement is April 27th. 27th. And one of the things, as you drift around and look at the maps, or maybe you've already done that, one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that I'm the decision maker for this project. So I'm gonna come out with a decision. And what I want you to keep in mind is I don't necessarily have to, what are we sitting here with? I don't have to choose alternative number 2. I can choose pieces of alternatives, in the end, if, and given the scale of this, I really think that that's the best approach because, I think, choosing any one kind of leaves out some of the good parts of other ones. And so if nothing else, as you look around on the tables at the maps and the alternatives, and you want to submit written comments, if you want to identify the parts of alternatives that you like and why you like them, that would be very helpful.
I'd like to just call out alternatives 3 and 4 here. I don't think they're really alternatives. I'm pretty sure they're both just required by law. So those should definitely be included in whatever action you choose. Perhaps you could speak to how they're actually alternatives and not just something that you have to do no matter what. Like
all of the alternatives will meet
LSRs.
All of the alternatives will meet law, policy, and regulation. But whatever is selected in the end will meet law, policy, and all of them do right now.
Mm-hmm. I just don't see how there's alternative. The way that you word your alternatives here don't really speak to management alternatives, but simply different emphases that are already required by law in the first place, such as, emphasizing the important impacts to watersheds and federally listed coho salmon. That's not an alternative. That's a law you have to follow in the first place.
I agree. And alternative 2, which is the largest of the treatment options, it adheres to law, policy, and regulations. All the things we need to do. And so alternatives. So with respect to wildlife, with respect to fisheries, kind of fill in the blank on that. It meets the tests of law, policy, and regulation. So on alternatives numbers 3 and 4, we tried to go an extra step and provide something, in addition in those to respond further to that concern.
Can I take a quick stab at that? I hear where you're coming from, and that brief handout that we have doesn't really discuss how, what the specific differences are. And
it doesn't. I think what would really help is a matrix, perhaps a table that outlines really some metrics that are different from one alternative to the next. That would actually help the public make informed input into what's going on here.
Okay.
There actually
Sorry,
is a
Rita.
table in the draft that
In the
does that.
CDS.
And so,
The main difference has to do with some design criteria that are included, and alternatives 3 and 4 that give greater protections to, you know, those wildlife species or those fisheries species. So there are some fairly concrete design criteria that are associated with that.
Those also help to evaluate the differences between doing those and not doing them. So that's one of the reasons you do alternatives in
See,
the
but then if I'm evaluating this, I would want to choose alternative 3 because you're going to emphasize the development of LSRs. But I'd want
Then
alternative 4 because you're going to take care of the coho.
Those are
Really,
great
you should be
comments to
doing
make
both,
because
right?
they're expressing your values.
Okay.
So my comment would be,
I got
we
you.
want to hear your comments.
So my comment would be make it easier for us to make the comments by making these alternatives really clear on what they are, because I feel like right now all of these things have to be emphasized. You know?
So, I mean, and that's an excellent point. And, you know, the handouts, and some of you, everyone got the little fold-out, you know, summary.
The maps are awesome if you're land managers, but for the public to make a comment or even develop a question on this is tough.
Right. And so then there's another map packet here that you can kind of walk away, you know, with the maps tonight that are up here too. And, you know, it's a massive project. It's a lot of information. So everything, you know, I have a draft EIS that when it's printed out is about this thick.
Is that here tonight?
And so I believe we do have a copy in there. And it's available on the internet. I'm going to get to you in just a minute, sir, okay? And it's available on, all this information is available on the internet. And so, you know, it's one of those pieces where, you know, as people want more, you know, kind of drilling down and finding that right place, it's a challenge.
I'd like to build on that comment about, you know, attaining and following the law. And it seems to me that in the Klamath, the past decades, you know, 30, 40, 50 years, have not complied with the anti-degradation clause of the Clean Water Act, and they haven't protected the existing uses and or the fishable, you know, swimmable aspect in, you know, in all areas. I think it's fair to ask why that might be, but it certainly appears that the way the Forest Service has managed it and the rate of, you know, liquidation of the forest has been a significant factor in the non-attainment. I have spent the last 15 years as a resident downstream of a managed timberland where we have put in, you know, monitoring that looks at suspended sediment, and this ownership converted from clear cutting to selection, and yet we're seeing the suspended sediment concentration continue to climb. And there haven't been landslides. You know, it was thought that landslides were the driver. But so that question of what is the driver, is it enough just to have rainfall falling on compacted, disturbed ground where you have deranged hydrology, you know, coursing down the hills from where the water is dumped off, you know, from the roads? And the answer seems to be yes. And so going back to the basin plan objectives and the prohibitions against, you know, impairing the water or managing it in a way that impairs the water and maintains it, you don't have a TMDL there, do you? You have a TMDL. And does that TMDL state that you're required to comply with the basin plan of prohibitions and meet the objectives of the basin plan? And so I think you need to look at an alternative that lays out these areas are not meeting the objectives. And then from that point, go forward and say, look, we've got too much alkali coming in from the, you know, the fire. We don't want to increase the peak flow anymore. We need all of the sponge, whether it's rotting wood from the maybe some of the trees that died, or the vegetation that could resprout on trees. We need the brush you know, because it intercepts rainfall and provides sponge. And really look at it from a point of how are we going to comply with the law and fully attain the law, and how can we do that in the shortest amount of time? So
I hope you include that in your comments.
I was hoping to just, you know,
Well, we're
say that.
yeah, we have a TMDL, we comply with the basin plan, we're working with the North Coast Water Quality, you know, board on the project.
You gain compliances, but is it really, does the science, does the monitoring that you're doing demonstrate that you're actually in compliance? That's the question. What kind of monitoring are you going to do? What will you do when the monitoring shows that it's not attaining those objectives? What's the, you know, what's the next step? How will you fund that?
Sure, would love to get your, you know, your thoughts and ideas on the monitoring piece also. So people are gonna have to like manage yourself, so.
We were talking about alternatives, you know, the wildlife BA and the fisheries BA just recently came out. And the fisheries BA analyzes a different alternative altogether. It's called a consultation alternative. So I'm wondering, is the fisheries alternative, consultation alternative, the same as the wildlife consultation alternative? And is there a brief overview that you could explain that alternative and how it differs from, say, alternative 2? Like, I know there's probably a lot of different moving parts in that, but if you had a brief nutshell.
You bet. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have to consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we have to consult with NOAA Fisheries, and of course we're doing that. So I think you're familiar with the streamlined consultation process. We have what are called level 1 teams. Those are the field biologists for both agencies working through stuff. So NOAA Fisheries and the fisheries biologists for the Forest Service have been looking at the project and looking at the project design. And they are engaged in what is called early consultation or streamlined consultation. And the BA that you see is the draft. It's where they're headed in the consultation process. It's aligned closely with the wildlife BA. The folks sit next to each other. They talk to each other. It's an interdisciplinary process. They're chewing on the same issues and the same problems. Of course they look similar. So that's what those are intended to do. The final biological opinion may be different. That's where the consulting teams are headed right now and what they're talking about. So in the fish aquatic BA, for example, there's a road that potentially had a lot of effect on coho salmon. It's called the Carolyn Creek Road. And if we were going to use it, reopening it would have a big impact. And that alternative and what they're discussing comes out that's not such a good idea. And if you want to look for that, it's up there close to the big bend in the river above Happy Camp. So that's an example of how that works through the alternative process. At the end of the day, there's going to be a final alternative that they will consult on, and that they'll issue a biological opinion or a letter of concurrence if it's a not likely to adversely affect determination. That's the way the process works. It may not be exactly what they're doing right now because it's intended to be iterative.
So Patty's decision could not be anything over what they consider in there. So
No, I actually wouldn't say it that way. I'd say that Patty's decision has to have a biological opinion or a letter of concurrence at the time she signs it, but it may not look exactly like what they're doing right now.
Who's Patty's decision? Is that you?
This is Patty, the Forest Supervisor, the person for the decision.
One of my favorite things is that people talk about me.
It's guaranteed where you're sitting.
So that's how that works.
So like one road has been dropped is what I got out of that.
Hugely impacting road.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, what other changes were in there, but that's okay. I'll look.
We can get the BA out and we'll dig through it.
As long as we're talking about that example, has that road been eliminated from all the alternatives or just from the fisheries one?
No, it has not been eliminated from all of the alternatives because that allows us to compare the effect of building that road in a different alternative so that when Patty makes a decision on this project, she'll have that information in front of her and say, wow, here's the effect of this, here's the effect of not doing it, and there's costs on both sides. So when you do alternatives, it's a process of exploration and learning. Now, we don't know all the answers, and I think that might go to the comment the gentleman made earlier there. When we start this process, we have an idea, and we put it out and offer it for comments, and we've got this giant interdisciplinary team out here with you folks and many hundreds of others, and you give us information that we use to make those things better and to learn from them. We don't know all the answers when we start this process, and if I said we did, I think anybody that knows this process would call me a bald-faced liar. So consultation is part of that learning and part of that exploration and part of that finding out that goes on in this stuff, how it works. And we may have something in an alternative that we think is a good idea when we start, and then after a while we say, oh, that wasn't such a good idea. And we learn by doing it, by exploring those alternatives.
There was a question over here and two up this way.
This is going to be my moderator right there.
Patricia.
I was just wanting to ask about the salmon salvage project and if you've combined the cumulative effects of the salmon salvage with this project and analyzed those cumulative impacts. And I've gotten some pictures of the salmon salvage project, and there was wet weather logging. And is that something that's acceptable for you guys to do? Do you condone wet weather logging? Is that part of your practice? And is that something that you're going to be doing on this massive scale in this instance?
I would say no and no. You know, our timber sale contracts have provisions in them about, you know, wet weather logging and, you know, when they can operate, when they can use roads. I mean, that's generally the one of the big drivers, you know, when we get rain and that kind of stuff, because roads gets off. And, you know, and there was an incident on salmon salvage where we had some sediment move, you know, down a road. You know, didn't make it to any water course, so that's good. But I'm not just, you know, I'm not saying that makes it okay. But, you know, I'm saying that we got on top of it and, you know, got that resolved. And no, it's not okay. We need to adhere by the rules.
You read that?
Oh, I was just wondering. Sorry, I've already forgotten your name, sir. What was it?
Andrew.
Andrew. Okay, so you spelled this out for me pretty well earlier, but I just was wondering if you could say it again and get input from your peers. I know this is only one aspect of the whole thing, but basically I was asking, so you're wanting to move into the area and remove burned up trees, you know, destroyed vegetation, and then afterward plant new trees in order for, you know, that area to regenerate and, you know, so you can allow, you know, reduce habitat fragmentation for species endemic to the area like fishers or martins or spotted owls. So, and my question to you was, whether or not that was really preferable over just letting like succession occur and letting, you know, opportunities for new species arise. And so what you said was, you know, this is going to clear up habitat fragmentation so that, you know, for the species already there, it's beneficial. I was wondering, are you guys going to be needing to clear new roads to get in to do this? Like, are you going to need to be plowing through it all? That would cause more fragmentation that might render somewhat futile any attempt to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just.
Yeah, sure. I can.
I was wondering what all of you guys
just
thought about that.
Recap a little bit of what we talked about. You know, first, I think it's good to point out that the areas that are proposed for salvage harvest out there are all high severity burn areas, and that's what we talked about. And Patty mentioned the our forest plan, which kind of is the guiding document for how we manage the landscape out there in the late successional reserve areas. And you know, the planting is, yeah, the proposal is to remove those dead trees and then go in and site prep, you know, reduce the fuels out there, and then to plant with, you know, appropriate conifer species, you know, based on the site. And the idea behind that is that, you know, in these late successional reserve areas, we're hoping to restore those to a forested, you know, ecosystem in a shorter time than would naturally take place under just basic succession, given the disturbance that has occurred out there. You know, a lot of these areas are high severity burn. They're very large. There's not a lot of availability of natural seed sources. It'd be some time before a forested ecosystem was back on the ground there. In terms of the roads, you know, we're not planning to build any new system roads out there. We are proposing to use some previously decommissioned roads and some existing temporary road beds that are on the hillside, on the landscape, as well as, what's the number, 3.6?
Something in that range.
Build about 3.64 miles of new temporary roads. So all of those roads that
And that's associated with alternative number 2.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I should couch that.
The biggest one.
But all of those roads, whether they be the previously decommissioned, the existing temp road access out there, or the new temporary access roads, will be put back to bed, put into a condition that's, you know, sustainable over the long term once the activity is taking place out there.
You know, in terms of, you know, allowing natural succession to play out in the landscape, there's lots of places that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I understand that. I just
Yeah.
wonder if there will be, I just wonder if you think what cons there might be to this speeding process, collateral damage, kind of manipulation of the process. I know you're not doing it everywhere. I'm just wondering in the places where you are, why that is like preferable in those places. I know you're not doing it everywhere. I'm just wondering from an ethical standpoint, or what's motivating you.
I think that the preference, I think that the pro on that is to get the you know, to get the forest reestablished quicker. You know, there are, you know, there's a lot of different science out there. So you know, don't jump my case immediately. You know, when I'm talking about this, but you know, Mr. Varick here, you know, who's worked on the Klamath for 30 years as a, you know, silviculturist, you know, can tell you places where it's taken, you know, 20 years to get, you know, trees reestablished again on sites. So,
Peter, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what's the definition of emergency situation determination, and why are we this proposal emergency situation determination, and what is discretionary power that the loggers are going to have? What does that mean, and what is like 70%? Like it's my understanding that's up to the logger who's under contract to say, oh, this tree, 70% chance it's going to burn, that it will die in 5 years, or it's 70% burned, and therefore I can log it. And that's my question to clarify. Emergency situation determination, why we are calling it this, and like the ecological value of trees diminishes after 2 years, or is it 30 years, depending on the diameter, and what's discretionary power, and so a logger, what does that mean? A logger can choose 70%. If it's going to die in 5 years, or 70% already burned, I'm just not sure about that.
so the areas that we're talking about salvage logging look like this. They're dead.
So does that mean that none of the loggers will cut down any trees that aren't completely dead?
No, I think that along our roadsides, you know, when we treat along roads for safety reasons, you know, we are going to make some calls about that, but we're going to be marking all of those trees, so it's not the logger who, you know, makes that call on whether or not that tree is going to die or not.
Okay, an emergency situation determination, what does that mean and why is this the case?
So the chief of the Forest Service, who's in charge of the Forest Service nationally, he has the ability to grant what's called an emergency situation determination. And and that's and I'm going to be straight up with people, so I'm going to ask for that at some point. And the reason I'm going to ask for that is that I want to implement this project quicker than under our normal our normal processes. And so
Why? Why is that?
Because the tool that that we're going to use to help reduce hazards and restore the land out there is the timber sale contract. And somebody talked about the value of trees just going downhill very quickly after they're dead.
I've read studies that show that that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is the basis of that claim?
Well, that's a great comment. So bring it forward. I think that I think most of the science says within a couple of years in this area that we lose most of the value that's out there. But I'd be very interested to.
So if there's evidence, scientific evidence that shows that case studies of different salvage or different fire areas that's not true, would that overrule the need for it to be an emergency situation determination, and therefore you wouldn't ask for that?
I'd be interested in the information that you have so that I can consider it.
Patty, just for clarification, the draft EIS says that in salvage units you're looking at taking 70% probability of mortality, which is 70% scorch when you look at the thing throughout the entire salvage unit, so it wouldn't just be roadsides. And I think it goes down to 60 when you're looking at the roadsides. So actually is the, all the stands don't necessarily look like that because the draft EIS also kind of clumps the moderate and the high severity areas together. So it's moderate and high severity areas, and it's also, the proposal is, proposing to log green trees as well.
So, do we have much?
We're all standing here looking at this map of the fire severity behind Kimberly there. There's 4 different colors on that map. But for most of us, we're seeing blue, which is low, and red, which is high, right? There is some moderate severity that is within our salvages, but the most part is right on the edges. The fire doesn't burn exactly how you would lay out a harvest system. So we did our best to follow that high severity, but on the ground on the map might be a little bit different. We will be going in and marking trees that we think are going to survive. We'll be leave tree marking those. It's not going to be left up to the logger to do.
In the salvage unit?
Yep.
All salvage units.
Yes. We will be marking leave trees.
So they won't have discretionary power to choose trees to cut down. All leaf trees will be there. So we can see the leaf trees and examine those for ourselves. And that will be what is resulting after the harvest. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
My understanding is that you're going to start this in July or something. You're hoping to get this thing underway. And, I just heard you say, this is a big project and it sounds like a lot of work, Are you really going to be able to do the environmental, protection work, all this work in that time and do a good job? Do you have the ability to do that?
I'm hesitating here because I'm tired. And I'm tired because of what you just said, because it's been very busy and it's just a lot of work and that kind of stuff. And, we brought in people like Mike, to help us out, and other contractors to, keep on track. And, it's my job and it's our job to make sure that, we hit that environmental protection bar, and that we, and that we take a look at all the things that we need to consider as we move to a decision.
When
And,
can we see the mark?
we're going to have to do that.
When will we be able to see the mark?
Some of it's marked now. It's a process. There's areas you can go to see, if this alternative is selected, what it'll look like.
And so if you don't finish the mark by the time you're ready to let these contracts out,
I can't sell something that's not marked.
well, you wouldn't be the first forest supervisor that did.
It'd be the first time I've done it.
Yay.
I
I have a question. Where's the money left for these timber sales going to go to? What, going to go back into the community? Is it going to go back to enforcing the trees? Is it going to go to administration? Is it going to go to the loggers or private companies?
So when we have trees that have a commercial value, and again, I've been talking about how, if we can sell these relatively soon, they're gonna have some value. So we sell them, we use a timber sale contract to sell them. And we establish what a minimum bid is, based on the value. And so if somebody wants to buy them, they have to come in and they have to bid at least that. And there's a whole variety of things, and these guys are gonna pull me off the stage in a minute because, I'm gonna start talking about things I shouldn't be talking about. But there's a whole variety of things in those timber sale contracts with regard to, road work and, other obligations that they have to take on, if they're going to, buy and harvest these trees. So, typically, just to put it in perspective, salvage wood, because from the moment it dies, it does start to lose value. People aren't willing to pay a whole lot for it. And the other thing is that there's a lot of those areas out there that are going to be they need to be helicopter logged. The helicopter is going to need to come in and do that. It's a very expensive piece of equipment, and raises the cost of anybody who wants to log that. So this is kind of a long-winded way of saying, so I don't know how much, and that minimum bid piece. That largely gets put back, in the Treasury of the United States. So if somebody bids more than that, and so if there's a little bit of an increment in there, what we do is we develop, in simple terms, restoration plans, and we identify restoration work, and we can use that money to do the restoration work on the ground. So is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, they're good. They're kind of keeping me.
I'm glad you said simple terms because I need simple terms. Explain to me, if you will. When you showed the picture there and this thing of logging, I said like a dead tree. Take it down, throw it in the dump. But you're telling me it's got value. People will pay for it. Money value. So the money value must be based on some substance that the tree still has. And as such, aren't there insects and birds and animals that would also find some kind of value in those trees?
The bark beetles will. That's the
now
point.
What I've heard is, well, if you leave them up for 4 years, I think you said that, you sir. If they're up there, they'll in 4 years they're going to fall down, and then there could be a big fire that'll burn the whole place up. But in 4 years, when they fall down, you could hire people to come and clear them out. So. And that money would go to those folks who are probably maybe even tribal people in the community. Who knows who's going to get the money, but it wouldn't be money that some company was, the logging people, it seems, are going to get the value, take the actual life value that's still there and turn it into cash versus the environmental value staying there for the forest critters. So how do you make that determination to go with the money flow versus with the life flow?
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned was, so when things fall down, and if you're worried about the fuels, let's hire somebody to go in there and get them. And that's a challenge because, in fact, I'm trying to remember what that number looks like in the EIS.
It's lots.
Well, you're talking about using helicopters to maybe do some of the logging. The companies are going to do it, I guess. So
well,
the public protectors, i.e., the Forest Service, can't do it. And we're not. If this was a huge number of years ago, and there was a lot of forest, and we didn't have climate change and all this crap going on, then maybe you could say, oh yeah, let's get some money going out of here. But today, in the environment, the circumstances of today, we need to protect all of our species. They're going extinct. Mm-hmm. And does that come into any consideration in your mind?
Absolutely. It impacts to wildlife, to fish, all those things come into consideration. But again, to get back to your question about the, well, why don't, when they fall down, let's go in and clean them up then. And in the draft EIS, there's a really big number in there, and I don't know if it was $20 million. I don't know what it was, but it would cost, you know, the government and, you know, the people, you know, in this room to pay someone to go in there and do something that we have an opportunity, you know, in the next year to have somebody pay to do. So that's that pro and con piece.
I have a question about, and you might have some ballpark figure, like how much money has been spent so far on planning, even the contracting with the NEPA teams. Also, I know that, you know, there are some avenues for cash, like the two chiefs' money, was it $3 million that you just got to do? And some of that work is within the project area. So there is money that does come in, and there is also the chance that wildfire will come back through in the next 10 years and maybe take care of some of that for us. So do you have a ballpark figure of how much money has been spent on the NEPA planning so far?
You know, I mean, I really don't. I'm looking at my moderator.
Petey?
Yeah, you know, I will comment on this, and great. And you know, I would propose that everybody got one of these sheets, and they tell you where to get more information, where the DEIS is, where the comment page is, how to comment on it. You know, one of the things in there too, also there's the reading room, where anybody's comments that ever been, you can look at those too, and you see what they mean, what they're about. Can help you. But
That's a great.
yeah.
I would like to offer a thought. What you see is what you get. And we have put everything we have out for folks to look at. And we want your comments. There's no hidden box of files someplace or anything like that. And so we want folks to do what you just said. And you know, we didn't drive here to hear ourselves talk. We wanted to hear your comments and your thoughts and get those. And so I really appreciated your comment.
So if you don't comment tonight, you can comment still.
You can.
Right, you can be part of it, and you can find out more information too on it, you know. And see where others commented too. You can get those too.
Go ahead.
Regarding the process, I've been involved with the EIS process in '77, so I got some idea of how it works. And I know that Chapter 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations requires you to implement NEPA by having cost-benefit analysis and alternatives, and it's all spelled out. And you have to adhere to it. And our comments are going to have a lot more value if people frame them within the EIS process that it's spelled out in 40 CFR. You can download it. It's real easy to get. And the other thing is, if we don't like the final EIS, we can appeal it, right, with Chapter 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations. And I don't know, since I haven't read the draft yet, if you've told us, the public, that, so that we're fully...
Yeah, actually we have, and in the thing we handed out here, we have something about how to comment. Comments should be about the project and about the environmental consequences of the project and the elements of the project that you think are important. And that's what 40 CFR says to do.
Right, but
40 CFR 1500 says...
1500,
yeah.
Do you cite that in the document so that people
lots
get
of
it?
times.
Oh, good. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
The thing
it's in there lots.
Okay.
But that's our rule that we have to follow.
Can I buy a copy of it tonight? I'd like to get my hands on it. Do you mind if I...
It's on the web.
I know, but is there a
You
copy
know,
available? That I
it
can
costs
buy?
us a couple $100 to print each one of those.
Is it okay if we give the copy that we brought to him at the end of the meeting? Everybody okay with that?
It's okay with me.
We brought our last copy, so I want to take my copy home because it's got all my notes in it for editing.
That's the one I want.
And I just have a clarifying question, because you said there was an opportunity to appeal, but that's the emergency.
I'll get into that. So if we can't leave that one, just give me,
Okay,
give me.
I'll solve the problem. I'll share mine.
Oh,
I have
she
one.
is.
And there's two questions in the back.
Well, I want to, just a second, I want to finish up, with this, because, you talked about the appeal. So this gentleman up here talked a little bit about this emergency situation determination. And so the chief of the Forest Service can grant that, and what it does is it removes the appeal right. And so so if people want to sue, we go straight to court. And again, that's one of those things about, expediting the process. So I just want to be clear that that's out there.
So we go to court using Chapter 36 CFR to do that, to engage you at that point, is that correct? Or does the emergency thing nullify?
It's all about being in court at that point, so it's all about, having a complaint filed, and, I'm not a lawyer, there's probably a bunch of lawyers in here, so,
Well, I just want to know the process so I can do that if I have to. I don't want to do that. I got plenty of other shit to do.
It's going to be very difficult because they put additional obstacles for the public to basically stop this timber sale by having this emergency situation declaration. They have basically shut down that 60-day window into a 0-day window where they can have a record of decision on the same day the FEIS comes out. Is that correct? Is that correct?
yeah, it's really confusing.
So wait, can you explain it to me then?
I'm happy to explain it to you. I can, is everyone interested in that?
Yeah. Well, we want to understand, do we have redress? Do we have a way to redress our problem with the project?
So, number one, I said that I'm going to request an ESD. I don't know if I'm going to get it. So it's important to comment because comment gives you, appeal, or gives you standing to appeal. So you want to make sure that, that happens, okay? So, and if I get an emergency situation determination for this project, then the appeal process is removed, and we can go straight to court. We can go straight to court in order to redress issues with the project.
So we're the Ninth Circuit Court?
You should comment on it because the judge would want to see you comment.
Oh, absolutely. No, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So what happens if you go straight to court? Then are you in suspense while you're in court? No. Or you're actually working on it?
I'll just share, so typically what happens is that, the parties to the lawsuit, whoever sues, our lawyers usually get together and they talk about this stuff, and they work out a briefing schedule that will expedite it. So, we'll move it along, and, yeah.
But they could be larger.
Well,
So,
let me finish up here, yeah. So, typically no.
In the biscuit, that's what happened.
Well, I can't talk about the biscuit.
I'm just saying, that's my frame of reference.
Right.
So because they got that determination that it's an emergency, because the timber value was gonna degrade, so they basically just green-lighted the project, and then, yes, everybody was in court, and meanwhile, there was logging occurring in the sensitive areas. And now we have clear cuts lining hillsides because of that. And so my concern is that, I don't know if there is really any avenue for us to really actually challenge this emergency determination because it's a setup in my view. And so I'm very concerned about the process, because I'm very concerned that even with the, going back to the regular amount of time for the comments, in other words, pushing it back from April 13th to the 27th, I still don't feel like that's a very good amount of time for me as a concerned person to sort of communicate to other constituents about the scale and scope of this project, and then for them to get their act together to make substantive comments and learn all of these processes, and then have no opportunity for appeal in this, except for basically retroactively. That's my big concern about the process.
Two questions in the back.
I came in late, so what about all the animals that use snags and everything? And anyway, what about that? I mean, it seems like everything's just on a business deal, and nobody regards the wildlife. So that's probably been discussed. But what was said? What's the deal?
You want to talk about snags?
Sure. So, first off, there's a snag standard in the forest plan that the project has to meet. There are a lot of snags in the area. We did some initial sampling, and there's, maybe 1.5 million snags. There's a lot. And the places that we're actually working are a few thousand acres on 60,000 acres of essentially dead trees, and another 160,000 acres that have salt and pepper burn, partial burn, where there's mortality scattered throughout. So there are a lot of snags on the landscape. And we have standards that we have to meet in any place that we have operations. And if we don't have enough snags that are provided by what's retained in the riparian reserves or in the areas that didn't burn severely, we'll go back and mark more.
What's enough?
The standards that are in the forest plan describe that, and then if there's a special circumstance that we might find through consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the service would help us determine that in the consultation process.
Say that again? Just one more time.
Okay, so
Sorry.
how much of it do you want me to re-say?
Just the last piece?
Yeah.
Okay, so if in the course of consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service, our biologists talk with Fish and Wildlife Service biologists, and they come to a snag standard that they think is really important in the consultation process, then the Fish and Wildlife Service can make that a requirement in the biological opinion. There are a lot of safeguards in this. The first one starts with the forest plan standards for the Klamath National Forest. The second level is the biologist working on the project, and then the third level is the consultation process with the Fish and Wildlife Service for threatened and endangered species.
And do those, so you have a certain retention standard in the forest plan, but there's also the provision that if those trees are deemed a safety hazard to the loggers that are there, that they can be felled. So my question is, do you know what the OSHA standards are? I mean, like, what is the likelihood that you're actually going to have your retention trees? Because, I'm not familiar with the OSHA standards, but from, the caribou and panther, I haven't seen that the retention guidelines have been met. So I'm wondering, what about that safety hazard to the folks that are out there working, if those retention standards actually ever get met?
I'll dive into that. I was a sales administrator for a long time.
I think that retention standards get met, and it's about being smart about how you're leaving those snags on the landscape. Leaving a snag in the middle of a unit that's going to be logged is that's not sustainable. It's not going to end up there. So it's about, and I think that there's Kimberly, in front of you, there's some maps there that kind of map out, the leave areas around riparians, both, for the geologic and for, the aquatic side of things. And so, that leaves a lot on the landscape that is sustainable because you've got, got those big clumps. And so, in areas where, we have some, really big openings, we're going to look at the opportunities to leave more, and we need to leave them in a smart way, because it doesn't help anybody to mark something that, isn't going to make it through operations.
And the OSHA standard is 2 tree heights, by the way.
Is what?
It's 2 tree heights. So 100-foot snag, you're supposed to stay a couple hundred feet away from it. And there are definitions, leaning and whippy tops and stuff like that. No one is interested in someone getting killed by a falling snag, and us or anyone else. So we want to work really hard on the safety aspects, but we also want to work to make sure that we retain enough on the landscape. It's a dual objective. No one wants to see someone get hurt.
Moderator?
There's one in the back.
Is the Forest Service required to balance its checkbook? In other words, you know that you want to do certain restoration, and that you probably have a minimum bid idea on that. You also have a minimum bid on, if you cut the trees on whatever day it was, June 1st or July 1st, they'll have such and such a value. Could you, I suppose you did a cost analysis or something like that is required? And can you disclose that to us? Is it in the documents that you put out?
I'm not not sure I understood your question, so could you ask it again, please?
Okay, you have a desire to go in, and one thing you've mentioned is you want to jumpstart the forest growth. It just seems to me that that's true. And since we have, what, 20% of the workforce has given up looking for a job, what's the value of employing those people? I think there's a lot of people in this room who would.
I'll do it. You guys got training.
So I'd like to know the answer to that. I'm a taxpayer. I've paid all my life. And I'd like to see the checkbook and see that rationale. I don't want more money, more national debt, unless the people that are out of work are going to gain sustenance from it.
Yeah, I don't have a response to that.
Well, we need one.
Okay.
Then we have one over here and then here.
I haven't had the opportunity to read over the full DIEIS yet, but does it address carbon sequestration and eventual greenhouse gas emissions and climate change potential in each of the different alternatives, and if so, how?
I'll get that one. So climate change at the project level, something like this, is likely not to affect climate change. I mean, I've been working on climate change questions for a long time. I think the project is more an expression of climate change. Longer, hotter summers and changes in precipitation patterns, particularly mid-elevation snowpacks. There is an opportunity in replanting to sequester carbon faster. There is that potential. Do we have a good metric on that? Probably not very accurate, but I don't know if anyone has accurate measurements of that. There's a point, the distinction between precision and accuracy. More decimal places doesn't mean more information, right? And so what I'm more interested in this is the potential for climate change in the future to cause another large fire event like this. And when you look at the Klamath province, the place burns all the time. And when you combine climate change and fuel accumulation, you have a volatile combination. And that's why you see an emphasis in this project on fuel reduction. Fuel reduction runs through all the aspects of the project. So if you wanted to get into a carbon balance, like draw a carbon cycle on the board, there was a whole lot of CO2 that went up in the air last summer. Now, is that meaningful? Yeah, probably not, because over time that would have occurred anyway. The opportunity to sequester carbon, I think, is interesting, and there's been folks are starting to look at that. And, planting trees, I think, is generally considered to be a good thing. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but the project itself, what we're doing is, in my opinion, unlikely to have any discernible, measurable potential effect related to climate because of the nature of carbon cycles. But there is an opportunity to sequester carbon faster by planting trees. And that's been pretty well demonstrated.
Yeah, so before we leave that one, so here's perhaps my simple view on taking a look at things like climate change and fire on the landscape. So Carl, can you talk a little bit about the planting prescription and kind of what we've been thinking about?
It varies a lot, let's put it that way. Aspect, elevation, position on slope, lower third of slope, middle slope, upper slope, whether it's a south-facing slope or a west-facing or east or north, will change the density at which we would recommend how many trees to plant in some of those places, i.e. we get near the tops of slopes where fires burn at higher intensities and do it a little bit more regularly than they do down in the creek bottoms. Those are the places we're not going to plant as many trees. As a matter of fact, there's places we won't plant trees at all. Or if it appears that that's a place where fires run every time there's a fire in the area, well, maybe we just don't want trees there to begin with because they keep burning up anyhow. So we're not going to plant all of those spots. In places where we've got north or east facing slopes that were fairly dense slopes prior to the fire, particularly if we're in an area that we're trying to manage for old growth species or species that require denser stands, we'll plant more trees in there. And we'll be looking at the species. A similar mix to what was there now. We'll temper it a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, with thoughts towards climate change and the warming of the planet and stuff. But it's not going to alter us completely. I mean, like, we're not going to go out and start planting eucalyptus trees on the Klamath National Forest. We're still going to plant ponderosa pine and Douglas fir and Jeffrey pine and those types of species that have been there for hundreds of years, and to our best knowledge will probably still be there 100 years from now, at least in some density in some locations. So we'll be planting the same types of species back, and it's seed adapted from the site. It's seed that was collected locally within the genetic or a seed zone area that has been proven to respond well when reforested in that same area. Similar type climate, similar type precipitation, that type of stuff. We don't want to take trees that were planted down near San Diego or grew near San Diego, take the seed from those and plant it up on the Klamath National Forest. It'll be cones that were collected locally to the area. So that's already got some genetic adaptation to this region. So that's the type of things we'll be planting. Variable spacing. It's not every 8 feet or every 10 feet that some folks have complained about, you know, where it's just too regulated of a forest. We're looking at changing the spacing to some degree so that there is more variability within it. We're selecting the sites. I think the fellow back there mentioned, he said when he was planting trees that he would plant, you know, close to a log or a stump or something where it would get a little shade from that obstacle that's on the ground. We're doing the same thing now. We're paying more deference to hardwoods than we have in the past. If there's a hardwood in the past, you know, if it was 8-foot or 10-foot spacing, it didn't matter. We planted the tree regardless of whatever else was there on our grid spacing. We're not doing that anymore. We're looking at what else is out there. If we got some areas that are fairly rocky or seem to be dominated by hardwoods, we're going to plant very few conifers in those areas. Let the hardwoods sprout back, which they will, because the fires killed the top of the plant, the root system's all intact. All the hardwood species that we have on the Klamath will regenerate themselves just from stump sprouts. So they'll come back, and we're spacing off of them, giving room for them to maintain their persistence on the hillside, and we're going to put conifers a little bit further away from them. So I don't know if that answers all the questions.
I have a
but
question,
yeah.
just on that. I really appreciate you laying that out. It's very helpful. My question is, like, if you're so forward-thinking, you're considering adaptation to climate change in your prescription for replant, which that's the first time I've heard that, which is great news if that's true. How come the Karuk alternative lacks the replant element to it, the artificial regeneration? Like, why do the historic land managers of most of this area oppose that if what you're saying is true? I have a little bit of a conflict about how that works.
I don't know the answer, but I think the plan as it is done quickly and it's not complete.
But I think they believe in natural regeneration, right?
Yeah, I believe that's true, and we do too. We're not planning on planting every area, and it's not just because of where fires may burn. In areas that have a good local seed source, you know, the smaller high-intensity burns, Travis alluded to earlier on the map over there, there's little pockets that are 5, 10, 15, 20 acres in size. We're not proposing to do any salvage logging in those areas, and there's a local seed source, still green conifer trees, close by, so that will naturally restock that area. That's the route that those areas will be given. Where we're looking at are those big, that like Patty showed, areas of contiguous deforestation from the fire. Those are the places where the seed source is so far away. Don't get me wrong, it's not like it will never ever reforest. It could be true, but then again it might not. If you can tell me where the next fires will be over the next 50 to 100 years and the intensity of those fires, then I can give you a better estimation of how long it might take to restock and reforest some of those places with conifers. it's an unknown that I don't think anybody can accurately predict down to, 5, 10 acres. So those places where we don't have many seed trees or any seed trees, maybe for a mile or more. Yeah, some seed will come in from the edge. They'll start to grow. When they get big enough to produce cones, they'll scatter some seed. Those will come in, and it'll slowly towards the metal. The donut hole keeps getting littler and littler until it fills in. But when you throw in the wild card of natural fire coming through at some point in time and unknown intensities, that's where a lot of that stuff, if they're small trees and they get burnt up, well, then they got to start all over again. So again, that sets everything back. So it's it's a timing thing as much as anything.
Right.
And there's no guarantee that what we plant isn't going to burn either. It
Right.
could. It could easily burn, just like a naturally regenerated stand could. But if we do our site prep well prior to our planting, again, no guarantee a fire is not going to go through there. But one of the foresters that works with me on the district, we assessed all of the plantations, conifer plantations, in the Happy Complex after the fires this past fall. And of all the plantations that are out there, and I don't remember the acreage, it's in the document someplace, 70%, in our estimation, did not require any additional reforestation work or replanting. Either it didn't burn at all, or the fire crept through it but didn't hurt trees, or it hurt few enough of them that the area was still adequately stocked in our estimation, and we didn't see any need to go back in. Yeah, it'll be the distribution, it'll be a little different than what it was before. There's going to be some openings. Some natural regen will occur, so that'll start a multi-layered stand, which is not a bad thing, and particularly if you want multi-layered stands over time. And so we figure, okay, those areas are still on a trajectory towards a condition that we would be happy with down the road. So 70%, that's pretty good when you consider that a lot of folks don't feel that our unnaturally or artificially regenerated stands, won't make it through a fire. Now, there's not to say that there won't be a fire 10 or 20 years from now, that same plantation could be incinerated. It's entirely possible. But
can I just ask one quick
so
last follow-up
same thing
question?
could happen with the stands that were there.
Well, and my final question, and I'm really sorry if I'm dominating the space here, is just of the project area to be commercially harvested, I wondered if you could give a percentage that was backburned, the areas that were not naturally ignited but were actually backburned for the fire suppression efforts.
Very little.
Very little.
Very little.
Okay, there's about 5 minutes or so. I'm gonna jump in here. I'm the bird and I'm flying, and I understand that there's a forest plan, and I understand that these are different fires in different places. And in that forest plan, there was the cereal forest, the old forest, the preserve, and it's gone, it's burnt. So outside of this burnt area, you have a designated area that had old trees and intermixed and whatnot, as designated part of the plan to be logged. And I think that the bird may have flown out of the fire, and the habitat that surrounds the burn is very precious. And I think the Forest Service should change their thought of logging in those areas that were intermixed, that weren't being part of the preserve, because they are the preserve now. So I think there should be some adjustment. And I think you have 2 here and over there. Go ahead.
Can I go real quick? I have one comment and 2 really short questions. One is that when you're talking about hardwoods, it is in the wildlife section. It does say that 1,300 acres of hardwood is expected to be removed from alternative 2 with the indirect and cumulative effects. Second question, has there been a timber cruise done yet? Are you done with it, or are you working on that?
It's just kind of starting now.
Okay. And aren't you directed, when you have a plantation, aren't you directed to do initial attack on any fire? If there's a plantation involved?
I've been on the Klamath for 8 years. I've never told the fire team to protect the plantation.
Okay.
Okay, we have here and then back there.
So, you've got 218,000 acres or something like that, so you pitched out the number of 70%, you won't have to do anything replanting wise.
Those were plantations, not of the entire acreage.
Oh.
70% of the plantations that were out there prior to the fire, we didn't need any additional reforestation work done in them.
Okay, so anyway, there's some number of acres that it's obvious to you, or it was this winter when it was still wet enough to plant, that it needed to be planted. And I'm wondering, because, you know, when I was in my 20s, I planted thousands of trees. I was out there, you know, every winter. And I'm just, you know, you want to get a jump on it because the idea is that if you replant, you can beat natural growth, and then that'll help against global warming. So I'm wondering why the Forest Service, in their general broadest planning document, hasn't said, yeah, we're going to set this money aside, Congress is going to give it to us, and we're going to hire the people, and it's the very winter after the fire, we're going to get people out there on the ground because we know which areas are north and east and where they burn real hot, and that we're going to plant it and there's not going to be enough snags. So let's get the people out there on the ground. We don't need really any roads, you know, people can walk in, and let's get it done. Because when those trees come up, if you have to go in and drop some snags because they're a danger to hikers or whoever, you know, you can send somebody back in to do that, and you won't knock down very many of those little conifers. And even if you do, they'll probably, you know, grow right around it. I mean, that's been my experience. So I'm kind of starting to question, you know, if you're really sincere about this, getting a jump start to stop global warming, why wasn't it already done? And
That's an
I'll
awesome,
leave it at that.
That's an awesome question, and I'm gonna let this Clint, our fuels guy, talk about that.
So basically, it's doing plantations without doing any fuels. If I interpret it right, doing a plantation without doing any of the fuels work. Before that, and I think the fear and how we're seeing these fires burn, and we have a lot of areas that have reburned from, say, 1977, that reburned again, 1987, that reburned again in recent fires, and this is no different in this situation where we had some 1987 fire scars, if you will, that reburned in these fires that are part of this project. As what we're noticing in our site-specific analysis is in the areas where we haven't done any treatment at all, in other words, fuel buildup has been allowed, snags that were on the landscape that were untouched from 1987, whether it be land allocation or other reasons. Those areas have such a high fuel loading, and the drier climate that the Klamath Mountains has, our plantations, our small trees in those areas are simply just not making it.
I think it's a way to control water.
Control water?
Yeah, there's a lot of water storage here. This plan is all about controlling water.
Okay, so getting back, you know, and that is, if you're interested in sustaining those trees over time, you want to keep them on the landscape. You know, there's a lot of science around. Well, you need to reduce the fuels there so that they will make it through, you know, the next fires that come through.
There's only one problem with that, if I may. That hog fire you're talking about in '77 was burned 10 years before that, and the site prep that set the plantations up that burned in '77, and then 10 years later the fuel load came back. So you're doing the same thing again and again. You're trying to. I'm not saying it's your fault because you're stuck in this pattern, but the original burn that started this fuel loading cycle of low-lying canopy, so the lightning can get the ignition and the incredible spread potential, starts with the clear cut and the site prep, where you burn the ground, and it releases tan oak and other fire germinating species. Then you plant conifers in there, then they spray the place, for Christ's sake. which increases the fire danger because it dries out the top canopy.
So we're not spraying.
I know that, but even if you don't, you still have conifers, and I did all this for years, okay? You have conifers mixed in with ceanothus and tan oak and madrones and everything else out there, and the grasses and forbs. You got more roads, more access for people, it's recreational areas, multiple use areas. People come in and do all kinds of stuff, including drink beer and shoot, signs out there and stuff, throw their cans out. A can can start a fire on a hot day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when it's no breeze. Then the wind picks up, brings that small fire up into the top of that canopy that may only be as high as this roof here or down, maybe 5 to 10 feet high. Then it spreads like crazy and it goes up into the unmanaged stands.
Yep.
I've been in 2 crown fires because of this crap and almost died a couple of times and I've lost friends, okay? You're creating the problem by plantation development and clear cutting. It really is that way. And global warming is only making it worse. It's not helping anything. But the problem is overmanagement and the emphasis on the timber sale program. That started this whole nightmare that you guys have inherited, I think. And nothing's changed. You still want to plant trees after it and make it see somehow that's not going to happen again. To me, it's crazy, okay?
Okay, I want to get to this lady's comment, yeah.
I think it's obvious, like, all the water goes here. Like, why they pick this spot, And if we kill the fur of the tree, we're killing the brain of the tree, It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Mine was just really quick. I've done some stuff at Mount St. Helens, and you might want to look at the literature on that. This whole idea that it has to move in just from the edges is not what's happened there. That you do get these funny little patches that start.
You're right.
I've heard a lot of great comments. And people should put them in comments. They should put them in writing. And your purpose and need and your objectives are very important to hear the comments to that, to read that, to what's being said, because they would drive the document as well as the forest plan. But it's all in this document.
Okay, so I want to talk just a real quick one. It's important to us that if you guys want information, you have a way to get it. So we'll get you a printed copy. I really did bring the last one I had tonight. And I think we've given them all away. We can also get you a DVD. I've got a sheet of paper right here if you want to put your name and address on there, and I'll print up some DVDs as fast as I can and give them to you. But this is all on the forest website. But if you need a printed copy, we'll make you a printed copy. Okay?
Of the whole EIS?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
if you need a printed copy, I'll get you one. But I need your address to do that. So, top of this thing, DVD, bottom of this, draft EIS. Okay?
But you can download it off the website.
It's all on the.
I've done that. You can do that.
Some people want it on paper.
That'd be really cool if we could have like a public like this, what we had today. If we didn't have to ask
screwing
for it
this
to
up,
happen,
Petey.
and if it could happen again for all the people who didn't go so far the way to have time on a Tuesday from 5 to 8. If like maybe we can do a weekend for people who work 9 to 5 that don't want to go home. Maybe we can have another thing where this is like gonna happen instead of us having to ask it to happen for the larger community that they can't be here.
I just want to comment that I think it would be great for there to be an advertised actual public hearing on the Westside Recovery Project, but I also want to just to say thank you for your flexibility this evening. And it's really, I really got a lot out of your presentation. It gave me a lot of fodder to come up with my comments, and also help a whole bunch of other people come up with comments. And, I know we can have follow-up, and I appreciate your transparency and just taking questions off the cuff.
Can we do this when the final comes out? will we have any kind of public process at that point, or do we just have to just decide what to do after we see the final and it's publicized?
So you're suggesting to have a public meeting or an open house or a public meeting on what the final
Yes.
decision was?
Yes. I'd love
Consider
it.
yeah.
I think that would really work.
Okay.
And you see what happened tonight when we went to a hearing. It really is good, don't you think?
I didn't do it here.
You mean you didn't hear us?
No, it's good when everyone can hear the answers of everyone's questions instead of going one by one and having to repeat the same thing over and over.
It's a big difference. And I appreciate that you did it.
Thank you.
Thank you, people.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.